Hello YouTube and welcome to another video. So it's another review video today, and after how much I loved the sim racing gloves from Hound saw the video and were kind enough to send me a pair of their sim racing shoes, which are these. Now I've tried these for 2 days now. I got them on the Monday, I think it was. So the Monday just gone. I tried them on that Monday evening, and I also tried them last night for about 2-3 hours when I made a couple of videos, did some Ferrari races, and yeah, basically just had a good chance to test them with iRacing. So, how did I get on? Well, first things first, similar to before, why use sim racing shoes? And the main thing for me is basically because I have a pair of the Fanatec V3 pedals. They're metal, and after a while, using socks, it can be quite uncomfortable. The metal starts to dig in you, depending on how you rest your feet on them and how much pressure you have to apply when braking. It can start to hurt your feet after a while, especially when you're doing longer races, you know. Again, not so much if you're just jumping in, doing like a quick 5-minute test or, you know, a 50-minute Ferrari race. But the longer races, you do start to notice that discomfort. The other thing as well, and this is more, I guess, me being a clean freak than an actual problem as such. When I wear socks, obviously, I'm walking around the house, you know, walking back and forth from my office into the house. You tend to get a bit of dust and dirt on your feet, and then when you go and sit in a sim racing pedal and you use them, after a while you sort of look down at your sim racing pedals and they're covered in little bits of dust or whatever kind of the dust and dirt you've got on your feet from walking around the house all day in them. And it just, yeah, it used to drive me wild where I was having to basically hoover and dust my pedals nearly every day or every time I used them. So it's basically more than the pain of using metal pedals and stuff like that. It was the actual dirt and the constant cleaning that pushed me to use sim racing shoes instead of socks. And so from a performance point of view, the biggest thing I noticed when I went from socks to sim racing shoes was that it's mainly sort of how much feel you get for the pedals. With the throttle, not, you know, it's not a problem. You're still able to get that control. You know, you're a lot, I don't want to say you're less precise with the throttle, because obviously there are times when you have to sort of feather the throttle and be delicate, but it's not so much of a problem with the throttle is the brakes. Now the brakes, especially with trail braking, you kind of need that constant feedback and being able to feel just how much pressure you're applying to the brake. When you lose that, so when you go from, say, just using socks to a shoe, depending on how thick the sole is, you can lose a lot of that feedback, and it makes braking a lot more difficult. You'll adapt, don't get me wrong, you know, if you go from something with a thick sole and you lose that feedback from the pedal, you will adapt, but I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. You should still want to be able to feel and be able to tell everything you're putting through the brake pedal, well, all the pedals, but especially the brake pedal. So in terms of the shoe I was using before, it was this, the Sparko Hypergrip. Now I promise this isn't basically Sparko versus Hound in terms of the reviews, it's just that's what I had before. Now this shoe, this was great. I've been using this for 6 months. Unlike the gloves, I got on with these completely. The only issue I ever had with them was that the sole is a lot thicker and they are a heavier shoe. Like when you've got these on, they are quite heavy and noisy, as I get told when I walk around the house with them on. The sole, while it's not overly thick, it's definitely thicker to the point where you do feel at first like you've lost that ability to know exactly how much pressure you're putting on the brake pedal. And again, you'll adapt over time and you'll get used to that. But that was one thing that I noticed when I went to these. But I've been using these for probably 6 months now, and I'd say I was more than comfortable using them. Like trail braking, that was no problem after a couple of months of getting used to them. As I say, when I tried the Hound racing gloves, it made sense that I tried their shoes because they were so good. I did really want to try a pair. They only released them last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago. And as I say, they were kind enough to offer to send me a pair because of the review. And I definitely wasn't going to say no to that. And obviously here they are. So first things first, I just want to stress how comfortable these are. I mean, they couldn't be more different. So side by side, obviously, this is definitely more of a shoe. Like I'd say that's basically what I'd call a shoe, whereas this feels like a very specialised product, and it's definitely aimed at a specific purpose as opposed to, you know, wearing as a shoe, whereas this, not that I'd want to, but I could wear that out and about and walk around in it, and the sole's thick enough, sturdy enough where I'd comfortably wear that as a shoe out and about. Again, style would mean I'm probably not that I'm the most stylish man, obviously. Whereas these, I mean, these are very thin. You wouldn't want to wear these out and about. The sole is very thin, which I will get onto in a moment, is definitely a plus point. But just this material, I tell you what it reminds me of. So back in a few years ago, there was a massive fad in the gym scene, like people wearing Vibrams, you know, they're like gloves for feet. And the material of these reminds me exactly of that. And that's not a bad thing at all, because those were extremely comfortable. I never really got on with them for training in. I just didn't like that feel in the gym of just something in between my toes all the time. But it definitely works in this case. Not only from a comfort point of view, as I say, that they're extremely comfortable. I mean, granted, I've only used them 2 nights, but I've used them for a stretch, like a few hours at a time, and you just forget they're on. One of the things in the old shoes, you know, if I went from being in a race in a sim rig to going to the PC to check the replay, sign up for a new race, is I'd immediately take the shoes off, just because they weren't, well, they're not uncomfortable to wear when you're sim racing. They weren't like the nicest shoes to wear, just like if you're sitting in a chair or, you know, lounging about. Whereas these, I've gone back and forth and I've just forgot they're on. That's such a good thing, because as I say, you know, when they're on, they do everything they should in terms of protecting your feet from the pedals and, you know, making sure that your feet are comfortable. When you're not sim racing and you're sitting at your PC, if your sim rig's in your living room or somewhere in, like in your bedroom, you just want to chill out on a sofa or the bed, like you forget they're on, and it's quite easy just to leave them on and just, yeah, I was so impressed with that, and that's a massive thing. Another really good thing about them that I like is just they are so easy to get on. So the Sparko ones, they have laces, and while I've never actually undone them, other than the first time I ever put them on, it does mean that, you know, they're slightly more difficult to put on. Sometimes you do have to wrestle to get them on just because they are snug. So I don't want to say that's a negative, but it just does mean that they're not as easy to slip on and off. Whereas these, yeah, they just go on so easily. Again, take them off, so it's just matter of seconds to get them on. So going back to the sole, one of the things I talked about earlier was braking, and how important that is to have that good feedback through the sole and through the shoe as a whole, just to be able to know exactly how much pressure you got on, so when you're trail braking you can come off nice and smooth and not sort of come off too quickly or come off, you know, too slowly. When I first used them, the first night I used them, like my driving was terrible, just because the way I got the pedal set up is I have the brake force set to 60%, so the default is 50. I normally had it 60, just because when I was trail braking before, I found it really difficult just to make sure that I was coming off exactly how I wanted, and that 60% meant that it wasn't too difficult from the default setting. It was just enough that I can compensate through that, you know, the sole being a slightly thicker and having to sort of adapt to that. 60% was just rubbish with these, because you basically put them at the default setting. 50% is plenty. I think because that thicker sole, I was overcompensating and maybe braking too much, and then, you know, because of that I was setting the brake force a little higher to sort of reduce the amount of braking I was actually doing. Whereas these, I wasn't doing that, because you just have complete control in terms of how much you feel of the pedal. So before, while I was overcompensating, like having to push a pedal in a bit more to get the same braking amount, this, when I was doing it, I just was getting no braking, because obviously braking too much with the other shoes, I was no longer doing that with these. So the first night was interesting. I basically had to learn to use my pedals again. And while my trail braking definitely is going to take some adapting to these, I think that it's for the better to be able to do this, because whereas before I was maybe changing settings to accommodate the shoe, these, I basically leave the settings as they were and just learn to brake properly in a shoe that, you know, I can feel the pedal with. It's almost like driving in socks. Not quite enough, as I say, that the sole's thick enough where you definitely know you've got them on when you're braking, but it's almost like wearing a sock in terms of how much control you have. In terms of grip, I mean, they both have a rubber sole. This one feels like slightly more grippier, but again, that's a lot newer. But neither shoe you're going to slip on. Whatever pedals you got, whether they're metal, plastic, you know, textured pedals or just flat metal pedals, you're not going to slip off with these. The grip's plenty on there. In terms of durability, I do wonder how durable they are, because of how thin the sole is, you know, over time, and I'm talking years, how durable the sole is, because it is very thin. So while that's a plus point for control and comfort, I do wonder about durability. And again, with the heel, if you're, depending on the base plate, if you got something like the Thrustmaster TLCM with a grated base plate, if you're rubbing those back and forth, something like this, it could wear. But like I've got the Fanatec V3 pedals. It's a smooth base plate, so I don't think I necessarily have to worry about that. The other thing to mention is just the branding. It's just so simple. Obviously you've got the SimHound logo there, but other than that, it's just a plain black shoe. So one thing I'd love to see, and I'm sure SimHound will do something like this eventually, is just have other colours. Like I love black and red. You probably noticed from the Sparko stuff I had before, both of those black and red. The shoes and the gloves that I had, as well as the new SimHound gloves that I bought, were black and red with the white bit as well. But so I'd just love to see that. So maybe a black and red version. There's nothing necessarily wrong with the black and white. It's just not something I would have gone for if I was buying and there were choices. As I say, I'd love to see us in a black and red one. But they've only just come out 2 weeks ago. I'm sure there's time for them to release new colours for that. So have I got any complaints about them? So if I am nitpicking and having something to complain about, it's just the heel. So if you look at the Sparko one, it goes a bit further up the back of the shoe and it's a bit more solid, but that's because the sole in general is thicker and a bit sturdier. Whereas this, because you have the thinner sole and you get that flex in it a bit, it also doesn't come back quite as high. So because of that, when you do rest the feet on the pedals, I mean, this totally depends on how you sort of rest your feet when you're using your pedals. But the way I rest my feet, I am resting pretty much on the back of the heel. And that's probably just a case of me having to, again, adapt the shoe, change how I'm resting on them. But it was just, sometimes I'm having to adjust my feet, and I am conscious of the fact that it's not necessarily as comfortable where I'm resting my feet like I'm used to. But I'm sure the only reason I'm resting my feet like that in the first place is because of how sturdy the heel was on the other shoe. And like these, I'll eventually find a position that's comfortable with those. That is nitpicking. So how much are they? So if you go and buy them now, they are £25 as a kind of introduction offer. Normal price is £30 or £35. I think it's 30. But again, so comparing it to the Sparko Hyperdrive, those were 50. Actually, no, sorry, those were 60. So £60 versus £30. I mean, obviously for £60, you could argue you're getting a bit more shoe in terms of material and a construction, but these aren't a fashion item. These definitely aren't a fashion item. You're buying them for a purpose, and obviously that is sim racing. And I feel with sim racing, the most important thing with a sim racing shoe is that you get the comfort, but not only that, do you not lose the ability to feel the pedals. And with these, I think that this is like the perfect mix of comfort and control over the pedals. You basically gain the same control as you would if you had socks, because of how much feedback you get through the sole. But you also get that comfort from not having to worry about pedals digging into your feet. So yeah guys, I don't think I've ever talked so long about a shoe before, but then I did say that about the gloves. I just want to make sure that all the bits that I could think of that are important when covering something like this have been covered. I'm going to start doing reviews with scores at the end, obviously different categories and stuff, just to make it more clear. If you just skip to the end of the video and don't want to listen to me waffle, you can just go check the scores and see what I think of them that way. So in terms of comfort, I mean, out of 5, if that's what my rating is going to be. So out of 5, in terms of comfort, I mean, an easy 5, just because of how thin they are, how comfortable, how breathable, getting them on and off, walking around on them. I wouldn't want to walk around these too long just because of the sole, and wouldn't want to wear that. In terms of design, so the design is very simple, you know. I'm going to give it 4 out of 5, and that's purely because at the moment they are just white and black. I would like to see red and black, but that's not available, so that's unfair really, I guess, to punish them for that because it's not a choice. 5 out of 5 would be if they offered red and black, but in terms of this anyway, because it's so minimal, it is just all black anyway. Even if they had the red, I guess you'd only see it on the logo itself or on the sole. So performance, and I guess performance is when actually using it as a sim racing shoe. So performance for me is going to be a 5 out of 5, and you're probably wondering why is that? You know, is it really a perfect score? It's just, I think whether you're going from another shoe to this, or if you're basically, this is going to be your first ever sim racing shoe and you're going from socks to sim racing shoes, you're not going to have to worry about, you know, losing any performance. You might have to adjust your driving style, and that's, again, that's adjusting it for the better, because if you were like me where you are accommodating your settings for a heavier, less feel shoe, then with this you're going to be adjusting your driving to actually accommodate for something that is much more suited to driving. So yeah, for that purpose alone, I mean, given they are such a specialised shoe, you're only really using them for one purpose. I can only really measure them against sim racing, and for that purpose they are basically 5 out of 5 for me. Price, so I mean price, it's a difficult one because they are so cheap. So before I did this video I did check a few other sort of competitors. Obviously that I've mentioned, the Sparko Hyperdrive were £60. There's a few other racing shoes like karting shoes you can buy. There's Sparko also do a gaming sock, and the prices range from about 35, you know, and then karting shoes and proper Sparko racing shoes and other brands go up into the hundreds of pounds sometimes. For the purpose they're intended, which is sim racing, you can't beat the price, to be honest. £30, and I'd say at the moment it's £25 as an introductory offer. For £25–30, you can't go wrong. I mean, granted, there's not too much to them, so it's not like, you know, you're getting a lot for your money, but for what you do get, it's absolutely perfect for the purpose it's meant to be serving. So yeah, you know, I guess for that price, maybe going back to sort of the design, I'd like to sort of see a bit more options in terms of choices, colour choices, like a red or yellow, green, whatever colours you might like. I know their gloves, they've got about 5 or 6 different choices that I mentioned in the previous review video. It'd be good if they had kind of matching colours for that, so I could get a pair of shoes to match my gloves. But again, we're nitpicking here. £25 or £30, even if you pay the full price, I think that's a great deal for something that is just so good. So in terms of an overall score, I'm going to give it 4 out of 5, just because we did give it the 4 out of 5 earlier, and obviously I did mention the heel and the potential durability questions that I might have, but I could find these last year's, and those durability fears that I had were unfounded, so I'm not going to punish it too much for that. But I think the 4 out of 5 is mainly just because of the lack of design options, the heel problem, which I think, you know, it could, depending on how you rest your feet, or if you're one of the people like me who rest their feet on the heel and break through with that and pushing on the heel, it takes some bit of time getting used to. So yeah guys, that's it from me really. I hope you found this useful. I will put a link in the description for you to go and buy these shoes. As I say, if you do buy them now, then you will get that introductory price. Otherwise it's only £5 more, so it's not a huge difference. But definitely go check them out. If you're someone who is racing with socks at the moment and you worry about losing sort of any precision, or, you know, getting slower if you wear a shoe, but you are thinking about it from a comfort point of view, definitely look at something like this. This is exactly the kind of shoe that you want. I definitely recommend it over something like the Sparko, just because I think if you go to something like the Sparko where it's a bit heavier, you will notice a difference, and you will sort of initially, for at least a month or two until you adjust, you will feel like a little bit slower, and you will feel like your trail braking and your braking is a bit off compared to what you've been used to. Whereas of this, I think if I would have gone from socks straight to this, I would have just gone through without any kind of transition at all. Whereas because I've gone from a heavier shoe to this, I'm having to adjust back to what my braking should have been before. I wasn't paid to do this video. I wasn't asked to do this video. In fact, they sent these to me as basically a thank you for doing the review and putting their brand out there. I would have done this review regardless whether I bought them, and honestly, I know it's easy for me to say, but I would have felt the same way about them. You know, it's not like I've been given a £1,000 direct drive wheelbase or anything like that where it saved me a hell of a lot of money. Ultimately, it saved me £25, which I would have bought anyway, and I told them that I was looking at buying them. So I'd recommend these regardless of the fact these were a very nice thank you from Hound. Definitely go check them out. Thank you very much for watching. Again, I hope you find these reviews useful. I'm going to do more. So the next one I'm going to do is the Fanatec McLaren GT3 wheel. I've just got that. I've been using that for a week. I want to do a bit longer with that. Unlike the shoes and the gloves, which are kind of a more immediate feedback in terms of how you're getting on and whether they make a difference. The wheel, because I've been using the Club Sport Formula wheel for basically a year now, it's going to be a lot harder for me to review and tell exactly what differences I'm noticing and whether it's making a difference in terms of my driving. So I'll probably do that review either this weekend or next. If you have found this video useful, please do give it a like. And of course, if you could subscribe to the channel if you want to see any more reviews, which I'll be doing in the future, or any of our race videos that we do, then please do give the channel a subscribe. I keep mentioning at the moment, we're trying to aim for 100 subscribers and we're about 30 off at the moment. So yeah, if you could do that, I'd be really appreciative of that. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, guys. I will see you next time.